So I want to thank Chairman Hicks, and once again, on behalf of the AC, thank Senators Blunt and Klobuchar for their remarks. I'm pleased to join you for this next set of panels. My name's Christy McCormick. I'm the Vice Chairwoman of the EAC. And I've got a great panel here for you today. Election officials are always striving to improve the voter experience. While their constant internal planning and assessment often goes unnoticed by voters, those of us who work in elections know the importance of these efforts. We're thankful that election officials are always thinking about the process or procedure that they can refine, a system that needs to be remediated or replaced, or a potential crisis that might require a contingency plan. We're thankful for this because it's these efforts that ensure that Americans have access to the very elections that serve as the bedrock of our republic and our democracy. Our discussion on this panel today will center around how best to serve voters during the 2018 federal elections and beyond. Joining me in this discussion are, from my far right, Secretary of State of West Virginia, Mac Warner. He is West Virginia's 30th Secretary of State. Secretary Warner has been both a defense attorney and a chief prosecutor. He rose to the rank of lieutenant colonel before his retirement after 23 years in the United States Army. Thank you for your service. After retirement, Secretary Warner was called upon to run the organizational capacity building section of the world's largest rule of law program in Afghanistan for the U.S. Department of State. For 5 years, he mentored the Afghan Supreme Court, Attorney General's Office, the Ministry of Justice, and the Ministry of Women's Affairs. A sixth-generation West Virginian who has spent his life promoting American ideals of democracy and freedom around the globe, Secretary Warner understands a vibrant, free market economy only occurs when clean, fair elections and a predictable court system under the rule of law have created a safe environment where investment can flourish. Thank you, Secretary Warner. We appreciate your time today. Next to me on my right and your left is Paul Lux, who came to Okaloosa County Elections Office in 1999 in Florida, serving in various capacities until he was elected a Supervisor of Elections in 2008. He currently serves as President of the Florida State Association of Supervisors of Elections. Paul has kept Okaloosa County on the leading edge of the elections community, participating in voting equipment beta testing and certification testing, voting equipment upgrades and election audits and recounts in other counties. He has also been deeply involved in improving voting for absentee military and overseas voters. He has participated in the Voting Over the Internet project, the Secure Electronic Voting and Registration Experiment, the Okaloosa Distance Balloting Pilot Project, and an electronic ballot delivery project. So lots of innovative experience to bring to this discussion. Paul, thanks so much for joining us today. Now, my left and your right is Sherry Poland. She's the Director of Elections in Hamilton County, Ohio, the third largest county in that state. She's responsible for the day-to-day operations and administration of all local, state, and federal elections. Hamilton County was among the first counties in Ohio to implement electronic poll books, automate the election day help desk, and create a youth at the booth challenge for high school seniors to work on the polls at election day. Prior to becoming director, she served as the board's operations administrator, where she was responsible for all aspects of the vote counting process. Sherry has administered over 45 elections, including 4 presidential elections. And that's quite a feat. Welcome, Sherry. I look forward to our discussion. And then on my far left, not that he's on my far left, but I first owe you an apology, Secretary Williams, because our program...
Do I have to say roll tide?
No, I'll actually cover that for you.
Accidentally inserted, there was a printing error and accidentally inserted Secretary Merrill's bio, hence the roll tide jokes. But Secretary of State Wayne Williams is the first Colorado Secretary of State to earn the nationally recognized Certified Elections Registration Administrator designation. Prior to his election as Secretary, Williams served as the El Paso County Clerk and Recorder from 2011 to 2015, where he successfully ran elections in the state's most populous county. As clerk, Secretary Williams focused his efforts on expanding services to citizens by adding more than a dozen 24/7 drop boxes and consistently running elections that were both cost-effective and voter-friendly. He also expanded access to online records and published instant wait times to help people spend less time waiting in line. Secretary Williams received the Medallion Award from the National Association of Secretaries of State for his efforts in protecting the right to vote during the fire-ravaged primary election in 2012. Before serving as county clerk, citizens of El Paso County elected Secretary Williams as commissioner from 2003 to 2011, where he helped run Colorado's lowest cost per citizen government while addressing critical infrastructure needs. And I want to thank you so much for being here, Secretary Williams. So I just want to say this panel will focus on the ways that each of you is serving the needs of your voters and working to administer secure, accessible, and efficient elections. To kick things off, I want to ask each of you about a specific initiative that we hope to highlight today, and then we can dive into some other programs and initiatives related to this topic. And I'll start with Secretary Warner. West Virginia has unveiled some innovative approaches to serving you OCAVA voters this year, including a pilot program that provides a mobile app for absentee military voters, and that has gotten a little bit of media attention as well. Could you please tell us a little bit about that initiative, why you felt it was important, any challenges you faced, and what the response has been from the voters who may benefit from this initiative?
Sure. Thank you.
Secretary Warner.
It's a real honor for me to be here this morning, and I think it's really important. First, thanks to Christy and Tom and the whole EAC Commission to host an event like this. It's very important for us to all get the word out to the citizens of America what has been going on, and it's quite different than perhaps the message that has been out there in the press quite a bit, that nobody cares, nobody's doing enough, Congress isn't doing enough, and so forth. From my perspective, being a little bit on the inside, I've been seeing an awful lot of work going on, and it's quite a bit different. And but by way of getting into the topic, when I came in this morning, Leslie Reynolds started giving me a little bit of grief about the way that John and I dressed, how we look like, in our appearance and outwardly anyway, outwardly. And so it reminded me, I'm a new Secretary of State, just elected 18 months ago or whatever, and I made it a point to get around to as many Secretaries of State as I could prior to taking office to pick up pointers from them and so on. And so I'm down there in Montgomery with John Merrill, and he takes me to his favorite bar. And there we are sipping Cokes, Diet Cokes, and I look up, and they're right across the bar from us are these two old, they're rough-looking characters. I look at John and say, "Hey, John, there's us in 10 years. And John goes, "You dummy, that is us. That's a mirror you're looking at." And I share that with you because a lot of times you're looking at something and you either see what you want to see or you choose not to see stuff that's right in front of your eyes. And I think that's what's going on right now with this mobile voting device or mobile device voting in West Virginia. I want you to stick with me here that this is a specific solution to an identified problem. And to address that, you have to look at risk and reward analysis. And when you hear what I have to say this morning, I would hope that you come down on the side that we do, that the reward far outweighs the risk that's going on here. And so to identify that risk, share with you just a couple war stories. My wife and I have raised 4 children, all of whom have served in the military. I did a military career. My wife served all over the world, and we had difficulty voting throughout that time. And it wasn't because we didn't want to, it was because it was difficult to go through the process, to get through those obstacles. Then I have my 4 children, and each of them have had trouble voting in their various assignments. By way of example, my oldest son, Stephen, served a year in Afghanistan. And to just give you a little bit of context, he was wounded there, and 13 of his 30 men were wounded in their year in Afghanistan. So that starts to give you a feel for these guys weren't back in the rear. They were out on point. They're sappers. They were route clearance personnel. And the way you clear mines in Afghanistan is you take an ice pick or a pickaxe and you drag it along the ground, and it catches a piece of wire like this. Everybody freezes, and you track it towards the IED in one direction and towards the detonation point at the other, and that's how you pick up mines in Afghanistan. Not a great job, especially in the heat and with Taliban and snipers and everybody out gunning for you. And so he went through a number of harrowing experiences, and I asked him after he returned what his toughest day in Afghanistan was, and he said, "Dad, no, without a doubt it was election day." And I said, "Election day? Why is that?" And he went into quite a bit of detail, but he was required to secure one polling place, and his men surrounded it, and in the process of the heat of this day, very long days you might imagine, they dug up 5 IEDs, okay? 5 IEDs. So think of the amount of effort that the Taliban was going to keep people from voting, and think of the risk that the American soldiers were putting their lives on at to go and secure that polling place, to allow people to go and vote in the first presidential election in Afghanistan's history, okay? Democracy at work in a foreign land that our soldiers are putting their lives on the line to protect. Keep that image in your mind and then multiply it times soldiers in 120 countries throughout the world today on a daily basis. Take that times the State Department and people that are putting their lives, their expertise, years of service as they're out there serving around the globe in 170 countries around the world. They have as much right to vote as we do, and we owe it to them to give them that opportunity to vote. And so just by way of example, in the Federal Voters Assistance Program, when they report to Congress after each election, let me just give you an example. I'll simplify it so we don't get into the big numbers, but if you take a representative sample of 100 active duty military, only 66 will be registered. Only 22 will request a ballot. Only 18 will receive that ballot. Only 14 will return that ballot. And only 13 will have their votes counted. 13 out of 100 people, active duty service military, will get their votes counted. And in West Virginia this last election, it was 9. Okay, that's the identified problem, folks. And it doesn't get better on the civilian side. When you get to the civilian side, report dated September of 2018, okay? 2018, right here. When you get into overall citizens serving overseas, okay, it's down at less than 7. Less than 7 people serving overseas. 3 million people serving in 170 countries overseas, and less than 7 in 100 get their votes counted. Yeah, I see some puzzled looks, because that's what I had on my face too. But I'd experienced it firsthand. My children had experienced it firsthand, and I said, we got to do better. We owe it to them. They have the right. See, when you get sent into harm's way, you want to have a voice in who sends you into harm's way. You want to vote for the person who's going to get you out of harm's way. That's what we're facing. And so I gave that to my elections director, Deke Kiersey, who's right here in the 3rd row, and I said, Deke, we got to do better. And you got to be able to do it, solve it so it's transparent. You can do it without electricity, because a lot of times you're serving in places that don't have something you can plug into the wall. You got to do it without computers and scanners and printers and that sort of fax machines. I said, we got to do better than this. And so he went to work, and he found a partner, okay, Bradley Tusk. And if the name sounds familiar to it, it's because he's the brains behind and the financing behind Uber. And think of what Uber did to revolutionize transportation in America. Well, folks, when you start talking about numbers of 7 out of 100 or 13 out of 100 getting their votes counted, we don't need to be tinkering at the edges. We don't need to push more money towards more videos and more programs and more federal assistance program people out there in the world. We need to revolutionize the approach we take to getting people their right to vote. And so that's what we've done. He hooked up with Uber. Now, folks, what I love about this is technology is not, it's bipartisan. It doesn't take sides, okay? So here I am. I'm a Republican, okay? Here is Bradley Uber, who was on Bloomberg's campaign, Blagojevich's campaign, left and right, coming together with a guy from India. A guy from India is the guy, the brains behind Votes, the app that was developed that Bradley Tusk and his philanthropies are financing to put this pilot project on. And he's coming to it because of Indira Gandhi being assassinated in India, and after that the Sikhs were forced to vote at gunpoint. And he was sitting there wondering, how can we have somebody vote and be able to send a signal that says it's a coerced vote so we can go back and vote it properly when somebody isn't putting that gun at our head? That's what drove him into the technology area. So think of this. A Republican, a Democrat, a guy from India, all coming together to make American democracy stronger by giving people a right to vote, an opportunity to vote, that don't have it on a regular basis because they're serving us overseas. So that's what's going on with this technology. And what I love to hear was Sheila Nix, who is a spokesperson for Bradley Tusk, in Charleston a week ago when we announced this rollout to 24 counties. See, we had a 2-county pilot project in May during the primary, and it worked great. 4 different audits to this whole process, pen tests, and all the other stuff. It all came out roses, so we decided we'd expand it. 24 of our 55 county clerks said, we want a piece of that because we want our soldiers to be able to vote that way. And so she came to Charleston and she announced it. She said, look, this is what happened in the Uber world. People stood up against it, said, oh, we can't go that direction and so forth. But once the people had tried it, there was a momentum, and it wasn't going to be stopped. And we all now benefit from having Uber in so many places across the states. We're going to have the same thing with this mobile device voting. Now, I'm not proposing that it go mainstream across the board. It's a specific solution to an identified problem. And so for giving the right to people to vote who are overseas serving us, that's the reward, and the risk is minimal when you start looking at the blockchain technology. Now, I listened to a Fox News broadcast just yesterday, and then it was just filled with all of the theoretical, what could happen, how mobile devices are insecure, and blockchain could be hacked. And so, folks, we're banking on our mobile devices. We're shopping on the mobile devices. We're sending our credit card information across it. If it's insecure for those, it's going to be insecure for voting, but if you use that to shop and bank and so forth, I think we should be able to trust soldiers overseas to be able to vote. And think about it. In those 24 counties that we have in West Virginia doing this, there are 999 different ballot styles. Do you think somebody's going to be able to hack in from Russia into your private device that you're signing in with a thumbprint, taking a selfie using facial identification against a government-issued ID card, and then validating it with another thumbprint afterwards to break in and identify the specific precinct ballot in a county in West Virginia to try to change one vote? No, folks. The biggest threat, Stalin said, it's not who votes that counts, it's who counts the votes. Well, folks, in today's world, it's one more. It's who reports the votes. They're looking to break into CNN, Fox, Google, Twitter. They've already broken into Facebook and so on. That's where they're going because they want to change the outcome with saying Hillary Clinton wins when, in fact, Trump had won. How would we have ever put that genie back in the bottle if somebody had said Hillary Clinton wins, a national news organization, because they had been hacked? That's where the real focus is. That's where they're going to spend their time and effort. That's why I'm saying the risk to hacking into a county in West Virginia to change one military person's vote, I'm not all that concerned about. Yes, I am concerned about it, but there are so many different layers. It's much more secure than taking a paper ballot, sending it overseas, letting it sit in some dusty mailroom until a soldier comes back off a deployment, is able to pick that up, vote it, properly find a stamp and sign it and so forth, leave it back in that dusty mailroom for another week until somebody comes and picks it up, put on a military cargo plane to ship it over. Folks, when you secure a vote with a blockchain, it's much more secure than that paper ballot. One final thing there. On the paper ballot, the voter verified aspect of this, folks, we solved that. As soon as you vote now, it goes into the blockchain, an email goes back to the voter so he can verify or she can verify how he voted, and another comes to the Secretary of State's office. It's just like any other electronic transmission of a ballot. We print it right there. We have it. There's a code on it so that it's not identified by person. It's secured in a lockbox, and it's open on Election Day. If there's a question. If there's no question, if everything measures up, then it's there for an audit if we need be. Folks, let's see what is really there and not just argue about the theoretical. Let's talk the reality that we are giving soldiers and sailors, airmen and Marines across the globe and civilians all across the globe the right to vote. And let's give this pilot project a chance to work. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Secretary Warner. Having spent a year in Iraq myself working on similar programs, I can attest to the issues that you're talking about. It is a big concern. And next to me, Paul Lux, you also have a large number of Okava voters in your district. Can you tell us a little bit about the ways you engage this community and some of the approaches you're using to ensure that they have access to the ballot?
Certainly, and thank you, Vice Chair. So Okaloosa County, a lot of folks say, why is Okaloosa County sitting up here? You're not Miami, you're not, one of the largest counties out there, but Okaloosa County, 135,000 registered voters, is home to the largest Air Force base in the world, Eglin Air Force Base. We not only have Eglin Air Force Base with the 46th Test Wing, the 33rd Fighter Wing, which is a joint program between the Army, Navy, and the Air Force. We have Hurlburt Field, which is the headquarters for the Air Force Special Operations Command. We have Duke Field, which houses a reserve unit, and then on top of that, 7th Special Forces Group Airborne, the U.S. Army Ranger Camp, the final stage of training for U.S. Army Rangers, the Navy Explosive Ordnance Disposal School, not to mention Coast Guard Station Destin. So we have all 5 service branches in our Our little rectangle shares the northern border with the state of Alabama. Have to say Roll Tide, sorry. Not sorry. But we share our northern border with Alabama, our southern border with the Gulf of Mexico, and 1/5 of my voters are either military or military family, whether they're in my county or whether they're out of my county. Fully 1/5 of my voters are military and military family, and that's how I got there. Army veteran myself, met and married my wife. She stayed in, I got out, and I followed her around. So I've been on active duty. I've been a reservist. I've been a military family member and traveled around and seen the problems, like Secretary Warner, that military people face when it comes to voting challenges. So engaging the community is of vital importance, especially when you have the numbers that we have in our county. Now, of course, not everyone who is stationed at Eglin registers to vote in Florida. However, Florida being a tax-free state for state taxes sure does entice a lot of them to register to vote while they're there. But we work very closely, as my friends at FVAP know. We've had some challenges with the Voting Assistance Officer Program on the Air Force bases, particularly Eglin, and they have worked around most of those, and we've got a really great team in place now. But we reach out to the military community during Armed Forces Registration Week, which is typically in June or July. We are there for Armed Forces Voter Week going on right now currently. I've got folks, of course, they're still in bed right now, or maybe not in bed, but they'll be going to the base today to help register our military families. The 7th Special Forces Group does Red Empire Week, which is sort of an open house for them, where they invite the community to come and see what the Special Forces teams are doing, as well as the U.S. Army Rangers also do an open house, and we try to be out there. One of the things Eglin has done that has improved their VAO program drastically is putting the VAO job in among the Eglin Airmen and Family Readiness Center. So these are the folks that are there to make sure people have the information they need when they're deployed. These are the people that are there to make sure that families have what they need while their service members deployed, but also in charge of all the newcomers briefings. And so once this election cycle is over and things are back on an even keel, we will be permitted to come on base and be part of their newcomers briefing so that we can actually reach out to all these folks right as they're coming into Florida. And one of the things that I'm most proud of in the engagement of the community was we had a law in Florida that allowed for late registration, but the things you had to accomplish to be part of this late registration process were it was only for people who were leaving the service, who were coming from overseas. It didn't deal with deployments at all. And I had in 2016 an entire battalion of 7 Special Forces who came back right after the book closing deadline in Florida for registration who were not able to vote because they were too late to register. So I was happy to lobby and work to change the state law to extend that registration deadline to include anyone returning from deployments overseas, which has greatly impacted and improved access in the community, both with the 7 Special Forces and with the AFSOC community. Ballot access is always an issue, and so of course, we have a lot of laws in place that cover a lot of what we have to do to make sure we give people ballot access. Notices of elections go out annually, and we send those notices out whether they're state, federal, or local elections. We send notices of elections because they don't see the ads, they don't see the campaign signs by the side of the road that are normal clues to people that there's an election coming, although curiously some locals still miss it. But we also, of course, have that obligation to mail 45 days prior to an election, and we maintain that in my jurisdiction for both federal, state, and local elections. And we typically exceed that deadline by 5 to 7 days, so we don't sit around waiting for the 45th day to get there. We try to get them out 50 or 52 days early if we can. Emailing blank ballots. Florida has been front and center for emailing blank ballots. We originally started doing this as a response to one of our biggest challenges with elections, which is the hurricane season, which conveniently coincides with election season. And so we were already mailing or emailing ballots to voters who were absent from the jurisdiction in the military as part of that. So when it became mandatory, we were kind of like, no big deal. We've been doing that for years. As the Commissioner mentioned, when it came to the Ease 1 and the Ease 2 grants, I was really quick to jump on, let's get involved with this money, with the Federal Voting Assistance Program. And in our jurisdiction, we put together a consortium of 34 counties that are using, some of the use has come and gone, but we called our group, Our Mission, Your Vote, and we have a landing portal for them. The ballot portal's been there since 2012 for this whole consortium of counties. So better than half of the 67 counties in Florida were part of our organization. And we use it to upload, and part of the best practice for using the system is I ask my members to upload all of their military and overseas members into the database as eligible people rather than waiting for them to request a ballot to be given access to the system. And this is, to me, is what makes it vitally important. It becomes a pull system rather than a push system. So their data is already there. When they want to go use it, they can log in with their credentials and use the system. It includes an online ballot marking tool, which allows them to generate a voted ballot that is an electronic thing. Now, Florida does not allow email return, but they can still use e-fax facilities to allow us to get their ballots in by fax, or if they happen to have printers, they can do it by mail. The other thing that we did when it comes to ballot access with the military, and again, it was an initiative that I was happy to push very, very stringently, was to expand the voting use of the federal write-in absentee ballot, or FWAB, to all of the races for which our voters are eligible to vote in. So it's not just used for federal races in Florida anymore. They vote for everything, state, federal, and local. But our biggest challenge remains, as Secretary Warner very clearly illustrated, the actual return of those ballots. What the guy in the foxhole does not have is a printer. He does not have a fax machine. And so we continue in Florida. I'm watching the West Virginia project very carefully because we continue in Florida to need better solutions for electronic ballot return for our military in Florida. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Lux. We appreciate it. And now to Sherry Poland. Sherry, poll workers play a huge role in serving voters on Election Day. But they don't just show up and volunteer that morning. It takes a great deal of ingenuity and time to recruit, train, and oversee poll workers. A couple of years ago, Hamilton County was awarded an EAC Cleary for its poll worker program. Could you please tell us a little bit about your Youth at the Booth and Partners in Democracy initiatives and the impacts these programs have made?
Sure. I'd like to start out talking about our Youth at the Booth program. In the state of Ohio, 17 and 18-year-old high school seniors are eligible to work the polls on Election Day. They are compensated for their work, the same rate as their adult counterparts, $181. For high school seniors, that's a good little paycheck for one day's worth of work. We do not assign them to manager positions, but they do a tremendous job in processing voters. We first initiated the program in 2007 and had some success with it back then. But in early 2016, we saw the need to really ramp up this program, and that was due to the implementation of electronic poll books. We implemented in 2015, and some of our poll workers really struggled with that technology. For those of you who may not be knowledgeable about electronic poll books, it's basically an iPad or a tablet that took the place of the old paper books where voters would come in and the poll workers would look up their name and sign them. There's been many benefits to implementing the electronic poll books, but our poll workers struggled a little bit. So we thought to ourselves, who's more comfortable with today's technology than teenagers? They have a very high comfort level with the iPads and tablets. So we needed a way to really develop that resource and recruit more of them. So we came up with the idea to have a Youth at the Booth challenge to expand upon our Youth at the Booth program. We coupled with a very popular local pizzeria in Cincinnati, La Rosa's Pizza, and promoted the Youth at the Booth Challenge. So the high school that provides the most high school seniors working the polls, based on a percentage of the number of high school students, we didn't want to discount the smaller schools in any way, would receive a pizza party and acknowledgement on social media. We would do a press release. My staff and I attend the pizza party and award them with a plaque. And in that very first year, Wyoming City High School won. And it was, the government teacher there is extremely engaged, and I think that's really important, because the more the government teacher is engaged, the higher recruitment you will get from that school. And she had the great idea to hold the pizza party on Inauguration Day, since these students had just worked and helped to administer the presidential election. And it was quite an event. This occurred during lunchtime. We had the pizza party. The inauguration was playing on the big screen. Afterwards, we went into the gymnasium. There were balloons. We presented them with the award, and it really had the feel that they had maybe just won a championship basketball game. And so it was a good experience for those kids. And at that time, I asked them to challenge their junior class to hold their title the following year. And guess what? They did. Wyoming won again in 2017. There is another school that's coming quite close to them, so they might have a bigger challenge in 2018. But the end result of all of this is that we now average 330 high school seniors working the poll. That's almost 15% of our workforce. And it's really made for the perfect team, because we have a younger generation with their comfort level of today's technology, and we partner that with our experienced, seasoned poll workers. Their adult counterparts welcome the high school students. You know, they're able to quickly process the majority of voters on the electronic poll books, which leaves the adults to handle those voters that might be experiencing certain problems and work them through that process. I think the program's not only a benefit for boards of elections and filling our positions, but we also hope that it sparks an interest in voting and civic engagement from an early age. We also have another recruitment program called Partners in Democracy, and that is where we reach out to other local government agencies and businesses and ask them to partner with us and give their employees the day off with pay to work the polls. We also have had success with this. It started out with our Board of County Commissioners. We went to them, explained the problem that we have in recruiting poll workers, and we have this great resource of county employees that we would really love to tap into. So our commissioners were the first to adopt the poll worker leave policy, and it was an easy sell to the rest of our elected officials in the county. So we now have employees from not only the Board of County Commissioners, but the prosecutor's office, the clerk's office, the public defender's office, all provide employees that work the polls on Election Day. We also have several local businesses that have partnered with us. One of Cincinnati's Fortune 500 companies, Western and Southern Financial, partnered with us in the last presidential and provided a little over 20 employees. They took it a step further. After the election, they conducted their own survey of their employees' experience in working the polls, and then they shared that feedback with us. And I brought with me a quote from one of their employees. I thought it was very, very interesting. This employee stated, "I've been with the company for 12 years, and I'd have to say this was one of the most positive and proudest experiences to date." So that was that employee's experience in working the polls on Election Day. So we use that quote to then go out and try to recruit other businesses to partner with us, or individuals who may be on the fence at working the polls. We know it's a very long day, but this is the type of experience you can have. Recruiting poll workers, there's no finish line, just like we talked about with cybersecurity. It's an ongoing challenge, and you know, we do have a few other ideas that we'd like to implement next year that we're still working out some of those details for the future.
Thanks, Sherry. Great ideas there. Secretary Williams, serving voters also means making sure they have confidence in our voting system and the end results. Colorado has been a national leader in a practice called risk-limiting audits, which we heard a little bit about this morning and a question on. It's gained a lot of national attention. Could you please tell us a bit about this program and how you're using it to serve the voters of Colorado?
Yep. You know, it might have been a late night, but happy Rocktober, everybody. So with respect to the good senator from Minnesota, this is the Election Assistance Commission's Election Administration and Voting Survey. You will see that, yes, Minnesota is high, but they are number 2 in voter turnout, not number 1, because CO stands for Colorado. Yeah, well, you know, rare air up there. So why does Colorado lead the nation in turnout? Why, with respect to my friends in Minnesota, and more importantly, let me talk to the realities of today's world. According to a recent NPR Marist survey, 46% of Americans think that that votes will not be counted in this upcoming election. 46%. 34% think that election officials will tamper with the results of the election. 32% think a foreign country will tamper with the results of the election. 38% think that state election officials haven't done very much or nothing at all to prevent foreign interference. These are staggering numbers, and they don't reflect the reality. And so I want to talk about a way that Colorado has approached helping to resolve those concerns that more than a third of our nation has with respect to the elections process. And to answer the question to the 38% to say, yes, we have done a lot at the state and local level to address these issues. When I became Secretary of State 4 years ago, that was after serving as a local election official. That was after serving as a member of a canvass board back as far back as 1997 with the old punch card ballots. So I've been involved in the process a lot. And there's really 2 goals in an election process. One is to run it fairly and accurately. And the other, and just as important in many ways, is for the people to recognize that it has been done fairly and accurately. So it's not just a question of, can we convince ourselves? The issue is, can we show other people? Can we show the citizens of our respective states and this nation that the election was conducted accurately and fairly? That's what I've been focused on, and that's where Colorado's risk-limiting audit comes into play. Let me briefly explain what it is. First, you have to have paper ballots that you can actually audit. This is an important step in proving that Colorado, in the past, before I became secretary, had a paper trail, but not actually a paper ballot. So the memory card for touchscreens was the vote. I adopted new standards that required an actual paper ballot. That's something a voter can verify and make sure that the touchscreen didn't alter anything or the ballot marking device they used didn't change its programming, because the voter can look at it themselves. And then what happens after the election is that we randomly select ballots from across every single polling place and every single voter and across every single county to say we're going to audit a certain number of ballots. And we tell the county clerk, by the way, this number, the closer the race, the more ballots we audit. This number varies with the closeness, with the size of the county, and we then tell the county clerk, by the way, these specific ballots chosen through an open source software that we've made available to others who want to use it, to enhance it. Actually using the $360 million, our Colorado's portion, we're enhancing that software right now to make it even better. Colorado's portion being about $6.3 million. But what we do is we then tell the county clerk, go grab the 3rd box of ballots and grab the 4th and the 8th and the 32nd ballot out of that box. And then grab the 5th box and grab these specific ballots. This differs from the types of audits that had been done in the past. In Colorado, for example, we had said grab a certain number of ballots, run them through a machine, and make sure it counts them the same as what the overall results are. This is an individual ballot review where we pull specific ballots And not just from some precinct or a randomly selected precinct or a particular county, but from every county with that entire universe of ballots. And we then have a bipartisan team of judges review that specific paper ballot to see if it matches the results from the cast vote record of that machine. We've done this now for 2 elections, 2017 coordinated election, which is our November election where state, local races are, and then a 2018 primary. Every single county in the state passed. Now, let me clarify a couple things. First, you don't have to have the exact same voting equipment. One of our large counties has chosen a different vendor than the rest of the state. It worked on their equipment as well. So it is not something that requires a single unified system. You do have to have the ability to actually have paper ballots to review. Because if I tell you, go find a specific vote, you need that paper ballot as a part of that process. So here's the reality. In Colorado, we have a way of statistically proving, of showing with statistical certainty that nobody in Moscow and nobody in Beijing and nobody anywhere else in the world changed a single vote in the election. This, to me, is a critical thing, not just for the integrity of the process, but so that the people know that the election is conducted fairly, so that they know that whoever won and whoever lost, those were the actual results. That's the fundamental basis of the democratic republic in which we live. We have to trust those results. And when I see a survey that says 1/3 of the people think someone's going to change results, that's something that we can't sit back and say, yeah, but we're doing a good job. We have to actually come forward affirmatively and say, here's the reality. By the way, all of those ballots under Colorado's open records laws and some reforms that I helped champion are public records. And so they are available for people to review afterwards. So if you don't like our risk limiting audit, you can sit there in a room and count them yourself. But it's that ensuring that people have that confidence that is something I think we need to do as election officials. Now, there are different variations that can be amongst different states. But I join the senators that spoke earlier today in saying, yes, I think you need a voter verifiable paper ballot, with one exception. As both of my colleagues have talked on the other side of the table here, there are some people who don't have regular mail service. For example, I was at the kickoff, the inaugural kill laying and other processes, and now for the actual christening of the USS Colorado, which is a ballistic submarine. Ballistic submarines do not get regular mail service. It kind of defeats the purpose of being stealthy if once every 24 hours you come to the surface to get mail. And so there has to be a process. There must be a process for individuals who serve on that submarine, who protect our right to vote, to have the ability to vote. And so there is a small number. And Colorado has an encrypted return option for individuals who serve on a nuclear submarine or other similar circumstances. But for everybody else, that ability to have a voter verifiable paper ballot is absolutely critical. And it provides us for a way of telling people that yes, nobody anywhere changed a single vote in Colorado or elsewhere in the nation.
Thank you, Secretary Williams. We're going to go to questions from the audience since we're short of time. I have other questions, but to reiterate Commissioner Hicks's rules, speak into the microphone, give us your name and your affiliation, and please ask a question. So we've got microphones. Who has questions? Here.
Mark Schneider with the MITRE Corporation. This question is specifically for Secretary Williams. Prior to implementing risk-limiting audits, what were your expectations in terms of costs, level of effort, et cetera? And after doing that, did you find that it was less than your expectations, greater, same?
Thanks for the question. If you did not have a cast vote record, as our new systems do in Colorado, it would probably be a more costly method of auditing. But with the newer systems and the cast vote record and the ability to pinpoint specific ballots, it's actually lower cost in most elections. And I say in most elections because the number of ballots you poll varies. If you had an extraordinarily close election, it would be more costly. I would submit that if you have an extraordinarily close election, it's worth spending that extra amount to make sure you have the right result. But overall, it's resulted in an easier process and a quicker process in most elections.
Other questions from the audience? You have one up here, one back there. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, Eric Fisher from the Congressional Research Service. I was just wondering, it's not what you all talked about, but there's been some talk about having more rank order ballots, particularly for close elections where you vote, you choose an order of people. And I was wondering if you all have ever considered doing that, or for any of the elections, what you see as the advantages and disadvantages.
I think ranked choice voting, is that what you're talking about? Anybody have any question or comments on that?
Well, one of my biggest concerns with ranked choice voting, I, like many panelists before me, have the Certified Election Registration Administrator certification from the Election Center at Auburn University. And one of the things they did for us in one of the follow-on classes after you do the certification is they gave us the same set of ballots, and they asked us to count them, one, by hand, and two, using various other methodologies. And of the number of different methodologies of ranked choice voting that you can choose, we actually, counting the same stack of ballots 7 times, came up with 5 different sets of answers, which concerns me, which is why I have never been a huge fan of ranked choice voting. Understand the reasoning behind the people who implement it, but for me personally and for a lot of my colleagues, that's always been my biggest concern.
Christy, if I might. Colorado recently adopted ranked choice voting rules. We do permit it for certain local elections. But there are some interesting questions, and I'm actually convening a working group following the election to address some of those. So let's say there are 5 candidates running, and A and B I really like, and E I absolutely hate. So I write 1 and 2 by A and B, and I write dead last 5 by E. But I don't know who these other 2 are running, C and D, so I leave them blank. How do I count that ballot? There are different methods of ranked choice voting, some of which you say you skip over the blank ones and my dead last choice becomes 3rd. Some say it ends if I skip. So there's a lot of issues that have to be resolved because not every voter is going to follow all of the rules and guidelines that you issue. I know this shocks some people to hear that. But think of how many of you, let me do a show of hands, you're a really informed group. How many of you read the complete voter instructions in your last ballot packet? 5, 6, great, and out of a pretty full room. But I think it illustrates that, or in the voting machine or anywhere else you were at, that lots of people may not read all the instructions. And so there are a lot of things to look at. It has some appealing opportunities, but there's some questions that have to be answered so that you get consistent results and that everybody knows what those rules are going to be.
Next question. Got one here, up here. Oh, sorry.
Hi,
Get that hand high.
Elizabeth here, Elections Counsel in the House Committee on Administration. My question is for Secretary Warner. I'm really excited about the mobile voting prospect that you've discussed, and I wanted to just know what the concerns are that you're hearing about election security. As you said, if it's good enough for banking, shouldn't it be good enough for voting? So what concerns are you hearing? What are your responses? And then in the same vein, if it's good enough for service members, do you think the eventual goal should be to move in that direction? And if not, why not?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Great concerns. We're hearing an awful lot is, again, back to the theoretical, that this could happen. Until it does happen, I'm willing to continue down that risk-reward trail that we've done. So many people, if they would just take the time to pick up the phone and call our office, or right now you've got Don Kersey. Don, if you'd stand up and wave to people. If anybody in the room has questions, please see Don. He really is the brains behind all this that pulled it together. And so you have that opportunity right now to talk to the guy that's responsible for this. And folks, we're learning. That's why it's a pilot program. That's why we're starting very small. Okay, we're talking a dozen or so that voted in the primary. And from that, one of our clerks came to us right off the bat and said, you got to get a paper verified trail so the voter can look at it. And so we worked on that between the primary and today. And what Nemeth Sani up at Votes came up with was this email where as soon as you push vote, the vote itself goes into the blockchain. Another email goes right back to that voter, and he can print that out. And then we get a copy in the Secretary of State's office. So you have 3 different opportunities to verify that. And if there's a question with any of it, then we'll go with the paper ballot. So those are the type issues that we're dealing with. We're improving it as we go. I'm looking for this wider audience in the 24 county situation. Folks, we've already had people right now in this election, okay, from 8 different countries: Philippines, New Zealand, Turkey, Israel, UK, Mexico, Canada. The people in all those counties or countries. So I'm talking about these people of the State Department and an instructor teaching overseas, a student in school in China or whatever. That everybody has an opportunity now to participate. So those are some of the issues that we're dealing with. And it's been nothing but positive by the people that expressed it. I had a West Virginia Air Force pilot that said, I was able to come back, and between flights, I was able to vote. His wife said, thank God for this. I have 2 children under 2. I voted between feeding my 2 children in my kitchen. Okay, that's the kind of responses that we're getting from people. And so back to your question to the broader audience, I'll let other people take it in that direction. I know other states are looking at it with other rationale. They're going to have to do their own risk-benefit analysis. This is what we're looking for. As long as people have that right to go to the ballot box or the opportunity, I think there's real value in waiting until Election Day to go do that. You saw what happened with the FBI and all these revelations, WikiLeaks and so forth, before the 2016 election. That happened in the last 30 days, happened in the last 4 days. Okay, so I think there's a benefit to waiting until Election Day. So I'm not looking to take it to a broader audience, at least not until we've proven the whole technical aspects of it and the process of it and the acceptability.
Question up here.
Hi, thank you. My name's Cole Kleitch. I'm a civics teacher, served on New Jersey's HAVA committee a million years ago. The part I wanted to pick up on, Director Poland from Ohio, as a civics teacher, I'm looking for ways we can engage the next generation of voters. And to use a military analogy, if I take a bunch of kids out to a flight line, show them an F-35, and say, if you learn how to fix this for 2 years, then you get to fly it. What I'm looking at is, how can we expand this election as an inspirational opportunity? We could train thousands of kids to be a ready reserve in an election, given state laws. The models are what I'm looking at, is how is that delivered? How is that training done? Because they're used to a certain way of education. Not every election official teaches, if you will, all the time. So that's a different kind of a skill set. The part I'm looking for is perhaps in Ohio, like we're going to do in Minnesota, pairing up high school students with military veterans for that training. So they sit next to somebody that knows something about service and training. The upside here, though, is what I'm looking for is West Virginia is uniquely placed because you put the 21st or the 26th Amendment over the top that gave 18-year-olds the right to vote. So my direct question is, in Ohio, but the other states as well, do you have a specific role that under 18-year-old students could take a role in this election and be of service to their country?
Yes, as I mentioned earlier, 17-year-old voters are not only eligible to work the polls, so that's a little young, get them a little younger, but they also can vote in primary elections as long as they will be 18 on or before the general election.
And I would just add that one of the things that some of our HAVA security money is being spent on is improving online training platforms. And so we are hopeful that bringing in and removing, because in Florida we have a requirement for a minimum of 3 hours for experienced poll workers, a minimum of 5 hours for new poll workers. And if we can eliminate, all but 1 hour of that training by doing an online platform, it will drastically improve my ability to reach that demographic of voter. And in Florida, as a pre-registered voter, you can serve as a poll worker at 16 or 17. And so we do have high school students in 2016 who were able to get time off from school. I'm really terribly interested in the program there in Hamilton County, just because I would love to see more and more, because like Secretary Wyman, I think my average age of my poll worker is about 65 to 68 already. So, but that oh, absolutely. Oh, no question.
Thank you. I appreciate your reference to Senator Jennings Randolph. He was the one responsible for the 26th Amendment. He started that in 1942 after President Roosevelt had lowered the draft age from 21 to 18, but didn't lower the voting age. And he said, if you're old enough to fight, you're old enough to vote. He stuck with it for 29 years, 11 different times. He took it to Congress and then into the Senate to get that 26th Amendment passed. And so when he finally did in 1971, the first person he registered to vote was Ella Mae Thompson, who was an 18-year-old at Davis and Elkins College. Her brother, Sergeant Tompkins, had been killed in Vietnam without ever having had the chance to vote. So it's a poignant lesson in West Virginia, and we take pride in this effort to get young people engaged in the process. So accordingly, we take a Jennings Randolph Award to the high schools who register 100% of their eligible students to vote. And so it's grown now. We have about 39 schools that got it this last year. They got 100% of their eligible students to register to vote. We also have the youngest delegate ever elected to a state legislature in the history of the United States. It's Sarah Blair. Was at 17 years old when she was elected, then turned 18 before she took office. So my message to you is find something. Each of your states has somebody who's championed youth involvement. Find it, name an award after them, and get out to the high schools, and people will rally around you. It's really something that is catching on in West Virginia. Thanks.
So in Colorado, we similarly have an award for high schools with a high percentage of graduating seniors who've registered to vote. We also have student judges with a slight variation. One of our counties has partnered with the local school district, and they actually close the schools on election day that allows the high schools to be used as polling places, and then the student judges designate which of the school activity funds they want the money to go to that would normally go to pay an election judge. And that's been extraordinarily popular. The school district actually received a NAS Medallion Award for the program because it really gets kids involved. And instead of selling beer at a baseball game to try to raise money for your activity, you're working as an election judge. And again, the amount you can raise in a single day can really help some of the activities at a high school.
Thank you, Secretary Williams. Thank you all. We are going to take I wish we had time for more questions. We could ask questions all day, but we're going to take a 10-minute break now. Please come back to this room at 11:45 for a discussion on security, national security, with the Director of the Office of National Intelligence, William Evanina, Undersecretary for National Protection and Programs Directorate at the Department of Homeland Security, Chris Krebs, and Vermont Secretary of State Jim Kondos, who's the current president of the National Association of Secretaries of State. So we'll see you back here in 10
Christy,
minutes.
if I might, just a quick announcement. I have a few papers up here with some of the stats I mentioned earlier. If you'd like to pick one up, please do so.